Are you getting the live stream on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sure am. Yep, that's correct.
How are you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you too. Well, I just started doing that kind of be accountable to somebody. So no, I gotta go running for Sunday or Saturday because otherwise it's like yeah. And so I went in the trees on my knees all week all gone. The trees keep the leaves so well. Okay. Great leaders. I try to run all year. Although I gained the chance to
Do a few minutes and then just yes. Yes.
Are you up here? Too far to go to. Well, you got to drive down to already. Yeah. Yes.
All right, hello everyone. We'd like to get started, so if I could have everyone grab their seats. Grab some seats. Feel free to grab some snacks while you're at it. Take those with you. I hope you had a chance to look at some of the work that's on the table. One of the major things that we've been working on with the anniversaries lately, the 35th anniversary and then now the 40th anniversary, is an anthology of editors' favorites. We've had some real kind of star work over the years, and the 20th anniversary issue, Wendell had sent along a couple of suggestions for his favorites, and we're hoping as part of the 40th anniversary to have a couple of online anthologies, one of which will be the editor's favorites. So we're really excited about that, and they'll be identified with the editor who selected them and so on. So that's pretty exciting as well. All right, so first and foremost, I want to bring up Libby Hertenstein, who is with the Center for Archival Collections and is a rare books librarian and general goddess of all things, all things book related, to talk a little bit about the collections that the library holds.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Perfect. Okay. So as Abby wonderfully stated, my name is Libby Hertenstein, and I am the Rare Books Librarian at the Center for Archival Collections. And I, like all of you, am here tonight to pay tribute to Dr. Wendell Mayo. More specifically, I want to pay tribute to him by sharing with you information about the materials he donated to the Center for Archival Collections, David D. and Patricia A. Anderson Center for Midwestern Literature. Starting in 2016, I had the pleasure, along with my colleagues, to work with Dr. Mayo on accepting a donation of materials that would ultimately culminate in the creation of the Wendell Mayo Collection and Center for the Short Story. The purpose of the collection, in Dr. Mayo's own words, He was the greatest donor in the world because when he donated his materials to us, he described everything, and he also provided us with an itemized donation list explaining everything. So I will be quoting from him a lot today. So, in Wendell's own words, the point of the collection was twofold. First, the collection contains a significant portion of works by the widely published short story writer. His stories in magazines, journals, and book collections not only reflect a range of experimental and traditional forms, but also a unique picture of the author responding to his times. The second purpose of the collection is the Center for the Short Story. He thought that this would be of interest to students and investigators because the author's works appear in over 100 independent and university-based literary magazines and presses in the United States, Canada, the UK, and Lithuania. These venues range from those publishing experimental stories to others publishing more traditional ones. The author, aka Wendell, that's how he always referred to himself as the author, has provided annotations of each magazine and press concerning its history and aesthetic character. Many of these magazines, often containing visual art, are works of art in themselves. The center is a unique opportunity for students and investigators to see the often overlooked yet critical role independent presses play by publishing emerging story writers alongside well-known ones. Students in the BGSU's BFA and MFA programs in creative writing may be particularly interested in researching these magazines and presses for their short stories. He was very well spoken, obviously. Dr. Mayo, when he gave us the collection, divided it into 5 major sections, which he also then described for us wonderfully, and also provided his own version of Library of Congress subject headings for every single thing that he donated. The ultimate scientist, and we thank him for it. So, the collection was divided into 5 sections. The first section was stories of U.S. Latinos, as that not only reflect the author's cultural roots in Southeast Texas, but also growing concerns with the cultural studies in the 1980s. Section 2 was the Midwest section. He told me when we tried to get his collection in the Center for Midwestern Literature that he didn't consider himself a Midwestern author. We assured him that he counted. Because of the author's family moved to and settled in the Midwest, Cleveland, Ohio specifically, a significant portion of the collection is devoted to a Midwestern sensibility, studies of the Rust Belt, concerns with jobs, the economy, and environment. The third section of the collection focuses on Eastern Europe and Lithuania in particular, reflecting the author's turning his attention to the social and economic changes in the region and world after the fall of the Soviet Union. The fourth section of the collection, the author's most recent work, stems from his training and work as a chemical engineer, something that he never really talked about, and I kind of wish he would have talked about more. I would try and ask him questions about it, and he would kind of dodge them, and like kind of give you these little like nuggets of wisdom of like, oh yeah, my dad worked for NASA, and you'd be like, oh my goodness, tell me more, and he'd be like, I've got to go. So the author's most recent work stems from his training and his work as a chemical engineer, influenced by his father's career as a physicist with NASA in the 1960s. These stories look back to the atomic age and space race of the 1950s and 60s, as well as the legacies of the 21st century. Finally, section 5, because the author was a teacher of creative writing for the past 28 years, 20 of those at BGSU, the last portion of the collection contains articles and notes on the subject. In total, Dr. Mayo donated 5 boxes of materials totaling 187 items. Along with the materials that I've previously described in the collection, he also gave us photographs related to his time in Lithuania, including source photos for some of his works and 2 manuscript journals written in 1993 and 1994 while he was teaching in Lithuania. He was also gracious enough to provide us with reviews of his work from other authors. Working with Wendell was an absolute pleasure. I truly enjoyed the experience of listening to him speak about his experience, his craft, and also I got to read all of the collection when I had to catalog it. So I thank him for that as well. My favorite work of his was Marley's Ghost Again, a short story of a boy, Christmas-time family, and a loud ghost. It made me laugh. It made me feel as though I knew him better. Tonight, I've brought some materials from Wendell's collection that you'll see located over there, and I'm going to quickly describe what I've brought. I encourage you all at the end of this to please read and look at his materials, touch them lovingly, and enjoy them. First thing we have is Centaur of the North, which was published in 1996. It's described as containing 9 resonant stories with characters who long to remove the shadows, including elusive, almost magical mothers, and to explore prescribed yet not fully understood destinies. Family histories, family mysteries emerging from legends, Wendell Mayo reveals the power of family storytelling, both real and imagined. Also included is the New York Times book review of Centaur of the North. It's a pretty big thing. It was published in 1996, and the author, Janet Kay, describes the collection as powerful. B-Horror and Other Stories, published in 1999, a collection of short stories. The characters in these 12 quirky slice-of-life stories set in a funhouse version of Middle America often find their personal lives reflected in the bizarre yet oddly apt circumstances of their jobs. My favorite photo of his that he provided us was the source photo related to B-Horror. He titled it, "What Rough Beasts," and the photo is from 1995 and is the number 10 trolley that the author frequently saw. It was a trolley such as this that inspired the story when the author heard the anecdote of it being ridden entirely by dogs one night. It's a wonderful picture. We also have the New York Times book review for B-Horror, in which the author calls Wendell's work beguiling and funny. In Lithuanian Wood, published in 1999, is the story of an American teacher of poetry in Lithuania that finds that the fall of communism has brought mixed blessings to its citizens. For some, the arrival of capitalism means the freedom to get rich. Others see themselves plunged even further into poverty. I've also brought the Lithuanian translation from 2003. I want to thank Wendell for introducing me to Lithuanian, a language that I never knew I was going to have to know how to catalog in. The majority of the photos that Wendell gave to us came from source photos related to in Lithuanian Wood. These photos really speak to his time as a teacher in Lithuania in the 1990s. He includes pictures of his language arts students, an image of the ceiling of St. John's Cathedral, a picture of his writing room, which seems beautiful and wonderful for anyone who likes books. It's just a wall-to-wall ceiling of books. And images of the Capitol as well. As I've stated before, Dr. Mayo was the perfect donor. Not only did he provide me with an 18-page itemized donation list, spelling out everything he wanted us to know, he also was the ultimate scientist in the fact that on the back of all the photographs that you'll see here today, he's taped actual physical descriptions of everything, including the people, the times, and the places, which for an archivist and librarian is the greatest thing in the world. My favorite thing that I've seen really so far in the collection is his journal manuscripts from Lithuania in 1993 and 1994 while he was teaching. They're a wonderful insight into him. They have funny stories, they talk about the people, they even have cute little illustrations. I've also brought the last 2 monographs that he donated to us. Survival House Stories, published in 2017. It's described as often humorous, always resonant. The 10 stories in Survival House not only look back to the collective mind of doom in the atomic age of the 1950s and 60s, but also address our legacy in our times. When the Moon Was Ours for the Taking, published in 2017. It was a runner-up for the Cut Band Books chapbook competition and focused on topics related to the Cold War, space race, and Cuban Missile Crisis. Finally, I've included perspectives on a changing Lithuania. It was published in 2014 and is an article that describes his experiences teaching in Lithuania. I thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak about Dr. Mayo, and I encourage you to look at his collections. This is a small portion of what we actually own, and if you're interested in seeing more, I encourage you to come to the library. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Libby. I echo that encouragement to visit the Center for Archival Collections. Is an incredible gift and resource to us here at BGSU. I'd like to bring up Sharona Muir now, longtime colleague of Wendell Mayo's.
Thanks to everyone for coming to this memorial. When Wendell came to BGSU, he and I were the first of our current cadre of 4 full professors to have been hired at a time of transition for the program. At that time, it consisted of a handful of faculty who were ready for retirement, and it was clear that the program needed new energy and new ideas so that we would be able to extend our venerable program begun in the 60s into the 21st century and hopefully beyond. That's a moment of rhetorical flourish I think Wendell would have appreciated. As soon as Wendell came on board, it was clear that he had a very clear vision for what a creative writing community should be based on his previous experience. Part of it was all the nuts and bolts, which it was a pleasure and an honor for me to work with him on. That included things like our entry-level classes, what we now call the 2000 levels, which at the time didn't exist, our plans for screening BFAs, and so on and so forth. He was full of ideas. He was full of enthusiasm for getting those ideas off the ground, and especially he was a master of amassing and organizing and presenting important data. So most of all, though, I think what made him unique and utterly invaluable to our program, a real pillar of it and a builder of it, was his vision of the creative writing community. He had a way of bringing people together, of finding ways to make students welcome, of creating frameworks for all of us to create the kind of camaraderie and structure that we now have. I'd like to tell a little story about one of these things. Wendell was the creator of the Proud Chapel Common Time, which is one of the signatures of our program. Only, and occasionally he'd mention this, but whenever he did, he would say, actually, it was my wife's idea. And the first time he did that, I was impressed because, frankly, when you're a young tenure-track professor, you want credit for all the great ideas you come up with. But here, because of that innate honesty and generosity that Wendell had, he said that, and he went on saying it, because with him, honesty and generosity were not a one-time thing. They were a habit. They were who he was. And another thing that I'd like to mention about working with him is that even in our driest, dullest, and most dire committee meetings, and they can get like that, when everybody was tense, Wendell would come up with some pun or wordplay or some wacky joke, usually to do with a pun. I'm a real hog for puns. It's a bad thing, I know, but Wendell just indulged in this fight. And he'd just crack us up. He certainly cracked me up. I miss that so much. And he reminded us that we were creative writing people. We were English professors. We liked words. We had fun with them. We get through it. I cannot express the combination of honor, honesty, generosity, discipline, hard work, and infectious energy and joy that was Wendell Mayo. Let me say in closing that there are some sensibilities as authors and as people who have high moral seriousness, who take life seriously, and whose personalities and perhaps whose work may be witty or ironic, but is fundamentally unsmiling as it exposes the seriousness of our life to us. There are other sensibilities who don't take life all too seriously because of its absurdity and make us laugh at ourselves. Wendell was that rare being who combined high moral seriousness with a kind of wild joy that came out of his pure, I think, never flagging faith in imagination and verbal imagination, what it could do to articulate whatever B horrors or other horrors we faced, together with our ability as people of imagination and spirit to encompass those, to give them a shape, to gain, if not control, at least a standing in this world to face who we are, what we need to be. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sharona. And now I'd like to bring up another of our colleagues, Lawrence Coates, to talk a little bit more about Wendell's work.
Well, thanks for coming, and it's nice to see so many of the former students I've had that I shared with Wendell. I taught with him for 18 years. One of the stories he told me that I repeated to students frequently was about his dissertation that he completed at Ohio University, which actually had stories both from B horror and from Centaur of the North. And he talked about how he had this dissertation and yet he realized he had to split it up and decide which stories went into one book and which story went into another book. And he did that difficult work and came up with two wonderful, coherent manuscripts, which were both published. And Centaur of the North won the Premio Aztlán. And he told me once that he'd actually gotten a phone call from Rodolfo Anaya, author of Bless Me Ultima, telling him he'd won the Premio Aztlán, which would be like me getting a call from John Steinbeck. I mean, Rodolfo Anaya has that stature as a writer for Latino American literature. And I said, well, that must have been pretty cool. And he said, yeah, that was pretty cool. But I just wanted to mention that because each one of his books really is a complete work of art. The strange B horror stories, which all kind of had some connection with 1950s monster movies, the deep connection with family and place that you found in Centaur of the North, up to Survival House, which is a very coherent collection about a certain era of nuclear fear in American culture. He was a thoroughgoing artist, and that's what I'd like to remember about him. Sorry. What a dedicated artist he was. I didn't mean to get emotional, I'm sorry. He blurbed my last book, Campo Vito, and I thanked him for it. And I called him El Maestro. That's who he was.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. A little bit of audience participation here. How many of you, we have been talking a little bit about memories, and as we've been sorting through the sharing on Facebook and so on, we've come up with a couple of commonalities, and I want to do a little poll here. For those of you who are alumni, how many of you received your call that you got into the program from Wendell? Okay. How many of you went bowling with Wendell? Come on. How many of you enjoyed campus poly eyes with Wendell? That's the larger number, right? We all, a lot of bits and pieces have come out with the memories that have been shared, and when we've been talking about them, everything that has been said tonight is also consistent with that, just the kindness and the warmth and the sense of humor, which certainly continues into his work. We had at the Masters, the Spotlight lecture, we have a couple of readers here from that experience. So do either one of you want to talk about that and what that was like? No pressure.
Why don't you go first?
Okay.
Or you could come up together and do it all again.
Do it all again?
Well, we
Oh,
had
boy.
we had the script in front of us.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Easy. Well, so it was such an honor to be able to speak. It was such an honor to speak Wendell's words out loud, and as the stories, the wonderful stories that they were. And when he asked us to do this, I was really sort of, struck by that he trusted us and wanted us so much to be a part of that celebration. When I was looking at schools that I wanted to go to, I did my research. I read the work of the instructors and students who had come here before me, and I read in Lithuanian Wood, and I have a connection already to Lithuania. And when I read in Lithuanian Wood, I just knew that would be a person I would want to be taught by, that it would be an honor to be a part of a program that really understood the value of that sort of writing and wanted to have that sort of writer share their experience and their knowledge with graduate students. So anyway, to have him as my thesis advisor was an honor. To be in class with him, out the gate in techniques, all of us, it was an honor. He was humorous, yes, but he was whip smart, and he never let you sit back on your laurels. He challenged you always to be better. And so I think to be able to be there that night and to read the words that had so inspired me to become a part of this program was just speechless, And when he passed, I burst into tears. I was at work. I was reading. I was at work reading Facebook, and I'm going to talk about that. And but I happened to be, and I saw it, and I burst into tears. And my coworker said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I'm not okay, no, because someone very dear to me has passed, and I'm feeling very sad about that, and I miss him still. So I'm glad we're here celebrating him. I am." Dan?
Yeah, so I was the other participant in the Creative Minds thing. So you reading a female role, and then we would switch. He would talk about switch stories. Yeah, and then I would read like more of a male sort of third-person narrator type of story. And I just remember being super nervous because I don't know if yours did, but my excerpts had a ton of confusing and difficult to pronounce Lithuanian words in it. And I'm, up there
No,
in front of this
you
huge
had those. I did not have
Yeah,
those.
okay, so
My
Wendell went
reader
easy
was
on
English.
Jackie here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
English. Was it all in? No. You had the worst.
The word was Bendravitus, which is like this Lithuanian term for some kind of exercise equipment. It's in like the basement of one of these stories. People probably remember that story. But yeah, I just remember like honoring Wendell in this room full of people to get all these words wrong.
I have so many words to remember.
But we did great. It was such a deep honor to be asked by Wendell to present his work, to portray his work All My Lonely Ones, I think is what he
That
called
was
it,
it.
right?
Yes,
and it
that was
like
the title. Yeah, it was
so
beautiful.
he kind of put it together as this menagerie of his loneliest characters, sort of like, you know, it was,
You're here to remember.
yeah, it was wonderful. And I just want to say, kind of while I'm on the subject, I remember meeting Wendell for the first time at AWP in Baltimore. That was 2003.
Oh my gosh.
It feels like forever ago. And he gave, the BGSU program gave a reading. Were you there?
I was there.
Lawrence? Okay, all right. And I remember meeting Wendell beforehand and telling him, oh, I applied to your program. And I didn't know yet if I was getting in or not. And I just remember him being nervous as hell for this really small reading in a small room. But I was right away, I was like, I like this guy. You shouldn't be nervous for this. But yet you're like sweating and nervous and like really deeply human about this and like wearing it on your sleeve. And that was always Wendell, you know? And I'll never forget, I was lucky enough to have Wendell for the condensed fiction workshop that used to run in the summers, face-to-face. Maybe it still does. I'm out of the loop on that. But I convinced him to let me, you know, he wanted us to write like 15 pages in a week. We were doing like the writer's colony thing where he has you like come and go and you write for hours and you're talking to him. And I had this wacky idea. I'm a poet. That's what I have my degree in, and that's what I read. I can't write fiction to save my life. So I convinced Wendell to let me write prose poems that week. And he said, that's fine. You still have to meet the 15-page count. I'm like, wow, I'm thinking to myself, like, all right, that's 2 poems a day plus 1 somewhere. I'm like, I'm going to try to do it. And he, you know, I had his full support. And when I came to him, like day 4 of that week, like, I don't know if I can do this, Wendell. Like, I'm running out of ideas. He said, well, you're going to do it because that's the deal we made. And then he gave me a lot of good advice too on how to manage my time and on how to write and on how to not get stuck on one idea at once, but to be working on multiple ideas. And until that point, it was probably one of the hardest things I'd done as a writer, but it unlocked something for me. Honestly, it was super transformative to write that much in that period of time. And that's something that is like, that skill still serves me on a daily basis when my writing time is limited. I go back to a lot of the advice from that class and other classes I took here, but that experience in particular, Wendell basically telling me, too bad we have a deal. You have to get these poems written. Yeah, it's just, I don't know how he did it, but he just inspired that in people. I mean, the work ethic that he just sort of quietly translated to all his students, I think is just, can't underestimate it. It's incredible. So thank you all for coming. This is a great turnout. And we're going to miss Wendell for a long time, forever.
I'm glad Dan mentioned the support for doing something a little bit weird. That's something that a couple of the students mentioned, of the alumni mentioned as well, just encouragement to keep doing that weird thing that they're doing, whatever it is. And that's something that I think is especially treasurable, because sometimes you run into a lot of roadblocks, and when you're trying to figure out who you are, what your voice is as a writer, and when you're experimenting, you need that extra support, you need that extra boost that people are encouraging the weirdness within, what the bizarre thing that you can't even explain for yourself, which is truly excellent. Would anyone like to read from the work or share any additional memories of Wendell? I'm like spraying some stuff on you. Any favorite passages or favorite writer's advice or anything? Come up. Steb Nicholson.
Hi, I worked with Wendell in the MFA program in 2006 to 2008. And I just remember a little story that he told that I think encapsulates a lot of who he was. And that is that he told a story, and I can't remember if it was in his PhD program or when it was, but he said someone told him that he could not use the word "that" in a short story. So, and he turned around and said, the hell I can't. And he wrote a short story with as many possible "that's" as he could. And I believe that story got published. I don't remember what it was. But he was not going to be told what he could or couldn't do in a short story. And that was Wendell.
Anyone else? Special memories? Stories? Yeah, come on, Bess. I'm excited because I know names from people. This is really good, kind of nice for me. Oh, I know your face.
Dressing on my own.
Oh, excellent.
So I was actually talking with Lawrence about this, but the first time I met Wendell was, I just rubbed dressing on my face. The first time I met Wendell was when he called me when I was admitted to the program. And the second time was when he picked me up from the Greyhound station in Toledo, because that was all I could afford to come visit. And I was with my best friend who was just coming for the fun of it. And he went to drop us off at some kind of seedy trucker motel, which was all that we could afford to stay at. And we went into the lobby, and we were kind of looking at each other like, okay, we're going to do this. You know, we're going to stay at this place. And we felt hands on our shoulders, and he kind of poked his head in. He said, "Excuse me for a minute," and he pulled us out of the place. And he took us home for the weekend and put us up in his, I guess it was his grandchildren's room, but it was a really magical room full of toys and sheets with trains on them, and it was just a really charming bedroom. And I spent that time with him and got to know him before he became my teacher. And I got to sample his pickles, so I have a lot of remembrances of that because he was testing these different pickles. And that's how he was the entire time through my degree, and all of your degrees, for those of you who knew him or worked with him. Just a very generous and real and kind artist, and a real true artist. And he taught me how to be an artist and a good person. So thank you, Wendell.
Others? Things to share? Come on, Suze.
I gotta tell some of these stories to people that get it, because since he passed, I've been surrounded by people who didn't necessarily know him. So the stories. Oh yeah, he sounds like a really nice guy. Yeah, he was a really nice guy. My master's thesis for BGSU was a novel, and I was one of the only. Well, I was, I think, the only person in my cohort to try such a stupid thing. And the thing was 462 pages long. And Wendell gave me his line edits the day before, wait, what was it? 36 hours before I had to turn it back in. I stayed up, because I think you all remember, if you weren't going to make an edit that Wendell wanted you to make, he made you write a paper as to why. Yeah. He took it very, very personally. If you did not address every single edit, or in my case, all 17,000 that's that were inappropriate. Actually, his note was, do a search in Word and see if you're comfortable with the amount of times you use the word that. So, but I made, and Lawrence can back me up, and he said, because I said, I've been up for like 36 hours, and I'm on page 375, and I don't know if I'm gonna make it to 462, and Lawrence was like, I got your back, but he brought it up in the thesis defense. He's like, you're missing line edits on pages. But what I remember more than that, I think, though, was the climax of my book is a rather intense death scene, and he his pen broke through the page, writing, "Holy shit! I never saw that coming." So I'm gonna frame that now.
Others, things to share? Yes.
So I just wanted to share my favorite piece of Wendell advice, and I think Bess and I have talked about this one. It really nicely encapsulates his overall philosophy, and it is, keep your natural teeth. I just love that. Of course, I had crooked teeth at the time. I then got braces. You'd probably be disappointed about that. But yeah, just the embracing the messy and the unconventional and the different. And the other thing is just when he read my thesis, he found the through line that I didn't even see in my own work. And it was extremely powerful. He's like, this is what you're writing about. Did you realize that? Every story was around the same theme. And it was really powerful for me to have such a gifted reader of my work. And it's a gift that, yeah, I'll never forget.
Others, thoughts, ideas, favorites?
I love when Wendell said you're cooking with gas.
You're cooking with gas. Is that where I got that probably?
No, but it's.
I mean, people say it, but I think I might have.
I remember he said it to
To
Liz,
Liz.
our first ever
Techniques class.
and he was right, because you're
She was.
Award-winning Liz.
I'll never forget that.
It's true. It's true.
Remember when he told us to not let the
Oh, GSW.
Oh,
yeah, don't let the GSW bastards get you.
Okay, good. Yeah, don't let the GSW bastards get you down. We all feel that. We all feel that. We've all been comp at some time, right? To some degree, in some place. Yeah, yeah. It's a thing we've done. It's a thing we've done. I, especially as a poet in the program, I didn't have the opportunity to work with Wendell as an instructor, but I did have the opportunity to work with him as a colleague, and especially having known him for so long since I had first gotten here, and even before that, because I had talked to him on the phone in my dorm at Michigan State, no less. I very vividly remember that phone call. One thing that we had in common was data, and folks who have served on my staff on Mid-America Review will understand that, my deep and abiding love of spreadsheets and just the data that we could bring to the table. And I actually remember an extra email that he sent me after a faculty member once, thanking me for bringing the data to the table. And I think that's a unity that we recognize in each other in particular, just this interest in having facts to back up what we're saying. And as he is an engineer, my dad's an engineer, and there was a real kinship there, I think, in that regard, which was really exciting. So I'll bring our formal thing to a close, but I do invite you to linger, to mingle, to continue snacking. Yes, Sharona.
I have a last little story.
Please do.
One of the more distinguished writers that came to visit here at BGSU to read was Edmund White, a grand old man of the gay novel. And if you read Edmund White, you know that he finds a way to lampoon everybody, including Michel Foucault,
Mm-hmm.
and a bunch of us went out for drinks with him later. Wendell had to go home a little early. And Ed White, who had been, making sly witticisms about everybody on earth, as soon as Wendell left, turned to us and said, completely seriously, I've never seen that expression on his face. He said, "That is a very nice man."
And what a great ending to this discussion, right? Please do visit the table to examine the wonderful work that Wendell left to our library. And as I said, please linger. But thank you, more than anything, thank you for being here tonight.